Captain Sarah Chen had always known this day might come, but nothing could have prepared her for the radio crackling to life at 0500 hours with the most dangerous mission of her career. The voice of Colonel Martinez was tense as he briefed her through the encrypted channel about General Williams, a 3-star general who had been captured during a reconnaissance mission gone wrong in hostile territory. The general wasn't just any military officer. He carried classified information that could compromise ongoing operations across 3 different countries if it fell into enemy hands. Intelligence reports indicated he was being held in a fortified compound approximately 200 miles behind enemy lines, surrounded by surface-to-air missile systems and patrolled by enemy fighter jets. Sarah stood in the pre-dawn darkness of the airfield, watching ground crews prepare her F-16 Fighting Falcon. She was the only pilot available with the specific training needed for this type of deep penetration rescue mission. Her colleagues had been deployed to other critical operations, leaving her as the sole option for what military strategists were already calling a suicide mission. The weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon and wind speeds increasing by the hour. Meteorologists warned that within 6 hours, flying conditions would become impossible, creating a narrow window for the rescue operation. Every minute of delay reduced the chances of success and increased the likelihood that General Williams would be moved to a more secure location. As Sarah conducted her pre-flight checks, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The base had been on high alert for weeks following intelligence reports of enemy infiltration attempts. Security was tighter than she had ever seen, with armed guards stationed at every entrance and patrol teams conducting hourly sweeps of the perimeter. Her aircraft had been specially modified for this mission, equipped with additional fuel tanks, advanced electronic warfare systems, and a rescue pod designed to extract a single person from hostile territory. The modifications added significant weight, affecting the aircraft's performance characteristics and reducing its maneuverability in combat situations. The mission briefing had been thorough but sobering. Enemy forces in the area included at least 12 fighter jets, multiple ground-based air defense systems, and an estimated 300 ground troops. Sarah would be flying alone, with no backup support, relying entirely on her skills and the element of surprise to penetrate enemy defenses. Intelligence officers had identified a possible extraction point approximately 5 miles from the compound, where General Williams was being held. The area was relatively flat terrain, suitable for a quick landing and takeoff, but it was also exposed and would leave her vulnerable during the rescue operation. Sarah's hands moved methodically through the checklist as she prepared for takeoff. Each system had to be perfect, because there would be no second chances once she crossed into enemy territory. The communication equipment had been tested multiple times to ensure she could maintain contact with base operations, though signal interference was expected to increase as she flew deeper into hostile airspace. The base commander approached her aircraft just before takeoff, his expression grave as he handed her a sealed envelope containing updated intelligence and backup extraction coordinates. He reminded her that the mission was classified at the highest levels and that she was authorized to take any action necessary to complete the rescue and return safely. As Sarah climbed into the cockpit and began the engine startup sequence, she reflected on the training that had brought her to this moment. Thousands of hours of flight time, countless combat simulations, and specialized rescue operation training had prepared her for exactly this type of mission. But the reality of flying alone against overwhelming odds was something no amount of training could fully prepare someone for. The control tower cleared her for immediate takeoff as the first rays of sunlight began to appear on the eastern horizon. Sarah pushed the throttle forward and felt the familiar surge of power as her F-16 accelerated down the runway. Within seconds, she was airborne and climbing rapidly toward the storm clouds that would provide cover for the most dangerous flight of her military career. 20 minutes into the flight, Sarah's radar warning system began detecting multiple hostile aircraft approximately 60 miles ahead. The enemy jets were conducting routine patrols along the border, completely unaware that an American fighter was approaching their airspace. She immediately reduced her altitude to just above treetop level, using the terrain to mask her radar signature while maintaining radio silence to avoid detection. The storm clouds provided excellent cover as she penetrated deeper into enemy territory, But they also created dangerous flying conditions with severe turbulence and limited visibility. Ice began forming on her canopy, forcing her to activate the aircraft's anti-icing systems, while constantly adjusting her flight path to avoid the worst of the weather. Her first real test came 30 miles from the target area when her electronic warfare systems detected an enemy surface-to-air missile battery scanning the skies with its powerful radar array. Sarah had to make a split-second decision between taking a longer route that would consume precious fuel or attempting to fly through the radar coverage using electronic countermeasures and hoping to remain undetected. She chose the direct approach, activating her aircraft's jamming equipment and diving even lower to use a ridgeline as cover. The tense minutes that followed felt like hours as she watched her threat warning display, expecting at any moment to see the distinctive signature of an incoming missile. Her training kicked in as she flew the aircraft with precision through the narrow valley, staying below the radar horizon while maintaining enough speed to escape if discovered. The electronic warfare battle was invisible but deadly serious. Enemy radar operators were clearly confused by the interference patterns her aircraft was generating, increasing their scan rates and switching between different frequencies in an attempt to get a clear picture of what was happening in their airspace. Sarah had to constantly adjust her countermeasures to stay one step ahead of their detection efforts. As she approached the target area, the weather began to clear, leaving her more exposed but providing better visibility for the rescue operation. Through her targeting system, she could see the compound where General Williams was being held, a heavily fortified facility surrounded by multiple buildings and what appeared to be a significant number of vehicles and personnel. The extraction point was exactly where intelligence had indicated, but Sarah could see that it was currently occupied by an enemy patrol unit that had set up a temporary checkpoint. She would need to find an alternative landing site or wait for the patrol to move on, but time was running out and fuel was becoming a critical concern. Her dilemma was interrupted by the appearance of 2 enemy fighters on her radar screen, approaching rapidly from the east. They had not yet detected her presence, but their flight path would bring them directly over her position within minutes. Sarah had to decide whether to engage them immediately, attempt to hide, or try to complete the rescue operation before they could interfere. The enemy jets were older model aircraft, but they were armed with modern missiles and flown by experienced pilots who knew the terrain intimately. Sarah's F-16 had superior technology and weapons systems, but she was outnumbered and operating far from any support. A prolonged air battle would certainly attract additional enemy forces and make the rescue operation impossible. She made the decision to remain hidden and allow the enemy fighters to pass overhead while she repositioned for the rescue attempt. The next few minutes were among the most stressful of her military career, as she watched the 2 aircraft fly directly over her hiding spot among the trees, close enough that she could see the pilots in their cockpits. As the enemy jets disappeared over the horizon, Sarah began her approach to an alternative extraction point she had identified approximately 2 miles from the compound. The terrain was more challenging, with rocky ground and sparse vegetation that would make landing and takeoff more difficult, but it appeared to be unoccupied by enemy forces. Her radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from base operations, providing updated intelligence that General Williams had been moved to a different location within the compound just hours earlier. The new position was more heavily guarded, but potentially easier to access from her revised extraction point. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began adjusting her rescue plan to account for the changed circumstances. The final approach to the landing site required her to fly through a narrow canyon while maintaining radio contact with General Williams, who had managed to activate a hidden emergency beacon that would guide her to his exact location. The signal was weak and intermittent, but it provided the crucial navigation reference she needed to pinpoint the rescue site in the increasingly complex terrain below. Sarah's landing was far from perfect as the rocky terrain jolted her aircraft and threatened to damage the landing gear. But she managed to bring the F-16 to a complete stop without any critical systems failures. She immediately began the shutdown sequence while scanning the surrounding area for signs of enemy activity, knowing that her aircraft's heat signature would be visible to thermal sensors for several minutes after landing. The compound was visible through a gap in the rocky outcrop, approximately 1 mile away across open ground that offered little concealment. Sarah could see guard towers, patrol vehicles, and what appeared to be a significant number of personnel moving around the facility. Getting General Williams out of there would require careful planning and perfect timing. Her communication equipment picked up the general's emergency beacon signal much stronger now that she was on the ground. The signal indicated he was being held in the eastern section of the compound, in what intelligence reports had identified as the main detention facility. Sarah studied the terrain between her position and the compound, identifying potential routes and escape paths while considering the time constraints she was operating under. The sound of approaching vehicles forced her to quickly camouflage her aircraft using natural materials and a specially designed cover that would help mask its radar and thermal signatures. She had practiced this procedure countless times during training, but doing it under actual combat conditions while listening to enemy vehicles getting closer was an entirely different experience. Through her binoculars, Sarah observed an enemy patrol unit conducting a systematic search of the area, apparently investigating reports of unusual aircraft activity. The patrol consisted of 6 soldiers in 2 vehicles, armed with automatic weapons and portable surface-to-air missiles. They were moving methodically toward her position, checking every possible hiding spot where an aircraft might be concealed. Sarah had 2 options: remain hidden and hope the patrol would pass by her camouflaged aircraft, or engage them before they could report her presence to the main compound. Both choices carried significant risks, but allowing them to discover her aircraft would certainly compromise the entire rescue mission and probably result in her capture or death. She decided to take offensive action, using her sidearm and military training to eliminate the patrol quietly before they could radio their findings to headquarters. Sarah waited until the patrol was within 50 meters of her position before making her move, using the rocky terrain to her advantage as she approached the enemy soldiers. The engagement was brief but intense. Sarah's military training and the element of surprise gave her the advantage she needed to neutralize the threat. But the encounter confirmed that enemy forces were actively searching for her and would likely send additional patrols when this unit failed to report in on schedule. With the immediate threat eliminated, Sarah began her approach to the compound on foot, carrying essential equipment and weapons while staying in radio contact with General Williams through the encrypted emergency channel. The general provided crucial intelligence about guard positions, patrol schedules, and the layout of the detention facility that would help her plan the extraction. The terrain between her aircraft and the compound was challenging, requiring her to cross open ground where she would be vulnerable to observation from the guard towers. Sarah waited for cloud cover to block the moonlight before making her move, timing her advance to coincide with the guard patrol schedule that General Williams had been observing from his cell. As she approached the compound perimeter, Sarah could see that the facility was more heavily defended than intelligence reports had indicated. Additional guard posts had been established since the general's capture, and there were signs that the enemy was expecting some type of rescue attempt. Spotlights swept the area around the compound at regular intervals, and she could hear the distant sound of guard dogs. The eastern section of the compound where General Williams was being held was protected by a high concrete wall topped with razor wire and monitored by closed-circuit television cameras. Sarah identified what appeared to be a blind spot in the camera coverage where she might be able to breach the perimeter without being detected, but reaching that position would require crossing an open area under the observation of at least 2 guard towers. Her radio crackled with another transmission from General Williams warning her that the guards were planning to move him to a more secure facility at dawn, just hours away. The urgency of the situation was increasing, but Sarah knew that rushing the rescue operation would likely result in failure and possibly cost both their lives. Sarah spent precious minutes studying the compound's defenses and planning her approach route. She identified the guard rotation schedule, the blind spots in their surveillance coverage, and the most likely escape routes once she had General Williams in her custody. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no second chances once she crossed that perimeter fence. The final approach to the detention facility required Sarah to time her movement precisely with the guard patrols and surveillance equipment. She began her advance during the next guard rotation, using shadows and available cover to remain undetected as she moved closer to the building where General Williams was being held captive. Sarah reached the perimeter fence without being detected, but cutting through the razor wire and electronic sensors required skills she had learned in specialized training courses that most pilots never experienced. Working in complete darkness, with only her tactical headlamp, she carefully disabled the alarm systems while creating an opening large enough for two people to pass through during their escape. The detention building was a concrete structure with barred windows and a single entrance guarded by two soldiers who appeared to be alert and professional. Sarah observed their behavior patterns for several minutes, noting that they maintained radio contact with a command post every 15 minutes and conducted visual inspections of the surrounding area at regular intervals. General Williams was being held on the second floor of the building according to the intelligence she had received, but getting to him would require neutralizing the guards and navigating through the building without triggering any additional security measures. Sarah had brought specialized equipment for this type of operation, including night vision goggles, suppressed weapons, and electronic devices for defeating locks and alarm systems. Her approach to the building was complicated by the presence of several other structures that could contain additional guards or security personnel. Sarah had to assume that the entire compound was alert to the possibility of a rescue attempt and that any unusual activity would result in an immediate and overwhelming response from enemy forces. The first challenge was getting past the two guards at the entrance without raising an alarm. Sarah positioned herself where she could observe both guards and the surrounding area, waiting for the optimal moment to make her move. The guards were experienced soldiers who followed proper security procedures, making her task more difficult but not impossible. She used a combination of distraction and direct action to neutralize the guards, employing techniques that ensured they could not alert other personnel in the compound. The engagement was swift and silent, but Sarah knew that the guards would be missed when they failed to make their next scheduled radio check-in, giving her a limited window to complete the rescue. Inside the detention building, Sarah encountered additional security measures including electronic locks, surveillance cameras, and what appeared to be motion sensors in the hallways. Her specialized equipment allowed her to defeat most of these systems, but each delay reduced the time available for the extraction and increased the likelihood of discovery. General Williams was exactly where intelligence had indicated, secured, in a cell on the second floor that required sophisticated lock-picking skills to open. The general was in good physical condition despite his captivity, and was ready to move immediately once Sarah had freed him from his restraints. His first concern was for the classified information he carried, which he confirmed was still secure. The escape from the building proved more challenging than the infiltration, because they now had to move quickly, while avoiding the remaining security systems and personnel. Sarah had planned multiple escape routes, but the optimal path was blocked by guards who had apparently been alerted to some type of problem in the compound. They were forced to use a secondary escape route that took them through a more heavily monitored area of the compound, requiring them to move carefully while staying in communication through hand signals to avoid making noise that might attract attention. General Williams proved to be an incapable partner in the escape, using his own military training to help navigate the dangerous terrain. The sound of alarm sirens began echoing across the compound, just as they reached the perimeter fence, indicating that their presence had been discovered and that enemy forces would soon be mobilizing for a massive search operation. Sarah and General Williams had only minutes to reach the aircraft before the entire area would be swarming with enemy soldiers. Their run across the open ground toward the aircraft was the most dangerous part of the entire operation. Spotlights from the compound began sweeping the area where they were moving, and Sarah could hear vehicles starting up and moving in their direction. The sound of aircraft engines in the distance indicated that enemy fighters were being scrambled to prevent their escape. General Williams kept pace with Sarah despite his recent captivity, demonstrating the physical conditioning and mental toughness that had earned him his rank and position. As they approached the hidden aircraft, Sarah began the pre-flight startup sequence remotely using equipment she carried, hoping to reduce the time needed to get airborne once they reached the plane. The camouflaged F-16 was exactly where she had left it, but enemy vehicles were now visible in the distance and approaching rapidly. Sarah and General Williams had perhaps 2 minutes to complete the startup sequence and get airborne before being overwhelmed by superior numbers of enemy forces who would certainly attempt to prevent their escape. Sarah helped General Williams, into the aircraft's rear seat while simultaneously completing the critical pre-flight checks that could not be skipped, even under these emergency conditions. Engine startup seemed to take forever, but within 90 seconds, they were ready for takeoff from the improvised airstrip in terrain that was never designed for high-performance fighter aircraft operations. The takeoff from the rocky terrain was the most challenging flying Sarah had ever attempted, requiring maximum power and precise control to get the heavily loaded aircraft airborne in the limited distance available. The F-16 lifted off just as the first enemy vehicles reached the area, their headlights illuminating the spot where the aircraft had been hidden only moments earlier. Sarah immediately climbed to low altitude and activated all electronic warfare systems as her radar warning receiver began detecting multiple hostile aircraft approaching from different directions. The enemy had scrambled every available fighter jet to prevent their escape, creating a gauntlet of airborne threats that she would have to navigate while protecting General Williams and the classified information he carried. The first enemy fighters appeared on her radar screen less than 5 minutes after takeoff, approaching from the northeast at high speed and clearly vectored to intercept her aircraft before it could reach friendly territory. Sarah had to make critical decisions about whether to engage the enemy fighters or attempt to evade them while maintaining course toward home base. General Williams proved to be an invaluable asset during the air combat phase of their escape, using his experience and training to operate the aircraft's defensive systems and provide tactical advice during the developing air battle. His presence allowed Sarah to focus entirely on flying and weapons employment, while he monitored threats and managed electronic countermeasures. The first engagement occurred when 2 enemy fighters attempted to bracket her aircraft, forcing Sarah into a high-speed dive toward the ground while deploying chaff and flares to defeat incoming missiles. The enemy pilots were skilled and aggressive, using superior numbers and knowledge of local terrain to press their attack despite facing a more advanced aircraft. Sarah's superior training and aircraft capabilities gave her the advantage she needed to defeat the first pair of enemy fighters, but her radar screen showed additional hostile aircraft approaching from multiple directions. The enemy was clearly coordinating their attacks to overwhelm her defenses, forcing her to engage multiple targets while maintaining course toward friendly territory. The air battle intensified as more enemy fighters joined the engagement, creating a complex tactical situation that required Sarah to employ every combat technique she had learned during years of training. She had to balance offensive and defensive actions while protecting General Williams and conserving fuel for the long flight back to base. During one particularly intense engagement, enemy fighters managed to score hits on her aircraft, causing damage to non-critical systems but confirming that they were using live ammunition and were determined to prevent her escape at any cost. The damage affected some of her electronic systems but did not compromise the aircraft's basic flight capabilities. General Williams continued to provide valuable assistance during the running air battle, calling out threats and managing defensive systems while Sarah focused on outmaneuvering enemy fighters and employing her weapons effectively. His military experience and calm demeanor under fire proved invaluable as they fought their way through increasingly desperate enemy attempts to stop them. The breakthrough came when Sarah managed to separate the enemy fighters and engage them individually rather than facing coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Her superior aircraft performance and weapon systems allowed her to defeat several enemy fighters in quick succession, forcing the remaining hostile aircraft to break off their attacks and regroup. As they approached friendly territory, Sarah's fuel situation became critical, but she had managed to defeat or evade all pursuing enemy aircraft while keeping General Williams safe throughout the harrowing air battle. The classified information he carried remained secure, and both of them had survived what military analysts would later describe as one of the most remarkable rescue operations in modern warfare. The final challenge was getting the damaged aircraft safely back to base with limited fuel and several non-functioning systems. Sarah had to carefully manage her remaining fuel while dealing with mechanical problems caused by battle damage, but her extensive training and experience allowed her to bring the aircraft in for a successful landing. Ground crews were waiting as they touched down, immediately surrounding the aircraft to assist with General Williams' extraction and to assess the battle damage. Medical personnel checked both the General and Sarah for injuries, while intelligence officers began debriefing them on the classified aspects of their mission and the information that had been recovered. The success of the rescue operation had strategic implications that extended far beyond saving one general's life. The classified information he carried provided crucial intelligence that would influence military operations for months to come, and his safe return demonstrated American capabilities to conduct successful rescue operations deep in enemy territory. Sarah's heroic actions during the mission earned her recognition at the highest levels of military command, but she remained focused on the fact that General Williams was safe and that the classified information had been protected from enemy exploitation. The mission had succeeded despite overwhelming odds, proving that proper training, advanced technology, and individual courage could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The aftermath of the rescue mission revealed the true scope of what Sarah had accomplished during those critical hours behind enemy lines. Intelligence analysts determined that she had single-handedly defeated 8 enemy fighter aircraft, neutralized multiple ground threats, and successfully extracted General Williams from a compound that was considered virtually impregnable by military planners. General Williams recovered quickly from his captivity and immediately resumed his duties, but not before personally thanking Sarah for her courage and professionalism during the rescue operation. The classified information he had protected during his capture proved to be even more valuable than initially realized, containing intelligence that would prevent enemy operations and save countless lives in future engagements. The battle damage assessment of Sarah's F-16 revealed the extent of the challenges she had overcome during the mission. The aircraft had sustained multiple hits from enemy weapons, including damage to hydraulic systems, electronic equipment, and structural components that should have made continued flight extremely difficult, if not impossible. Military engineers marveled at Sarah's ability to maintain control of the damaged aircraft while conducting complex air-to-air combat maneuvers and successfully completing the rescue mission. Her skill as a pilot and her ability to adapt to changing circumstances under extreme pressure became the subject of case studies at military academies and training centers. The enemy compound that Sarah had infiltrated was abandoned within days of the rescue operation, as enemy forces realized that their security had been completely compromised. Intelligence gathered during the mission provided valuable information about enemy capabilities, tactics, and future plans that would influence military strategy for years to come. Sarah's actions during the mission earned her numerous military decorations and recognition from allied nations, whose operations had been protected by the successful recovery of General Williams and the classified information he carried. However, she remained characteristically modest about her achievements, crediting her training, her aircraft, and the support of military personnel who had made the mission possible. The rescue operation became a model for future special operations, demonstrating how individual skill and determination could overcome overwhelming odds when combined with proper planning, advanced technology, and unwavering commitment to mission success. Military planners studied every aspect of Sarah's tactics and procedures to improve training and equipment for similar operations. General Williams never forgot the debt he owed to the young pilot who had risked everything to bring him home safely. He made sure that Sarah's contributions were properly recognized within the military hierarchy, and that her career advancement reflected her exceptional performance under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The strategic impact of the mission extended far beyond the immediate rescue of one general. The intelligence recovered during the operation led to the prevention of multiple enemy attacks, the protection of Allied forces in several theaters of operation, and significant advantages in ongoing diplomatic negotiations with hostile nations. Sarah continued her military career with distinction, eventually becoming one of the most respected pilots in the service and training the next generation of aviators in advanced combat techniques and rescue operations. Her experience during the General Williams rescue became legendary within military aviation circles, inspiring countless pilots to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. Years later, military historians would recognize the rescue mission as a turning point in modern warfare, demonstrating how individual courage and skill could achieve strategic objectives that conventional military operations might not have been able to accomplish. The operation proved that properly trained and equipped personnel could succeed against overwhelming odds when the stakes were high enough to justify the risks. The friendship between Sarah and General Williams endured long after their military service ended, bound together by the shared experience of that harrowing night when one pilot's determination and skill had changed the course of military history. Their story became an inspiration to military personnel around the world, proving that no mission was impossible when courage, training, and technology were combined with an unwavering commitment to bringing everyone home safely. The legacy of that single mission continued to influence military training, equipment development, and operational planning for decades to come. Sarah's actions had demonstrated that individual excellence could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, setting a standard for military aviation that would inspire generations of pilots to push the boundaries of what was considered possible in the service of their country and their fellow warriors.